What's up, guys? The Snowman here, back with another tennis top 10 list. It's my top 10 men's hardcourt players of all time. I've already made my top 10 overall players list, so please check that out if you want. But today my rankings are based solely off of hardcourt success. So factors like how many hardcourt tournaments did these players win, what was their record like in hardcourt majors, their win percentage on the surface. This is my list of the best 10 male players on hard courts in tennis history. Let's begin with number 10, Stefan Edberg. I could have gone with a handful of players at this spot, guys like Becker, Waylander, Courier. I'm pretty positive if I make this video again in 3+ years, Jannik Sinner will bump Edberg out of the top 10, but the Swede deserves loads of respect for his hardcourt prowess. A couple of US Open titles for Edberg, a pair of Aussie Open titles too, but those were on grass. Of course, the Australian Open didn't become hardcourt until 1988. Same for the US Open until 78, so older legends like Rod Laver won't be on my hardcourt list today. Speaking of legends, Jimmy Connors is my 9th best hardcourt player ever. His career from the early 70s to the early 90s, so with Connors you think about the 5 US Open titles, but unfortunately only 3 of those came after the switch to hardcourt. He also barely played at the Australian Open because back then it was far less prestigious. Nonetheless, Connors an all-time great on the surface. His hardcourt win percentage at majors 4th all-time behind Djokovic, Federer, and Sampras. Jimmy also 4th in total hardcourt tournament titles, just a tenacious competitor. Number 8 might shock you, but I have the Brit Andy Murray. He's the only player on my list to not have multiple hardcourt major titles, just the one US Open trophy in 2012, but basically all of Murray's numbers are skewed by facing the big 3 in their prime. 6 runners-up finishes at hardcourt majors, including an 0-5 mark in Australian Open finals, 4 of those defeats against the King of Melbourne in Novak Djokovic. Murray was a machine at virtually every hardcourt event. Again, only an in-peak big 3 could stop him, and even then his stalwart defense won him countless trophies on the hardcourt. John McEnroe is my 7th best hardcourt player. Like Connors, it's tough because McEnroe didn't really play at the Australian Open very much. However, 4 US Open titles, including 3 consecutive from 79 to 81, a huge part of Johnny Mac's hardcourt greatness. Some epic wins over his biggest rivals, including at the 1980 US Open, where he defeated Lendl, Connors, and Borg back-to-back-to-back. McEnroe 16-6 against top 10 players at hardcourt majors. He seemed to always bring his A-game against the best, one of the best volleyers the game has ever seen. Just a hair ahead of McEnroe, I have Ivan Lendl at 6. Those two rivals met 36 times overall, Lendl holding a 9-4 advantage on hardcourt. That's one of the reasons I placed him ahead. Lendl with 11 hardcourt major final appearances. That's tied for 3rd most. 5 of those 11 finals trips resulted in major titles. 20+ match win streaks at both the Aussie Open and the US Open. Lendl would bully his opponents with one of the most powerful and heavy forehands of the era. In 1989, Lendl with 38 wins and just 2 losses on hardcourt, both to top 2 players. Now we reach another level, top 5-time Andre Agassi. Like I said before, the modern players are favored on this list as a higher percentage of annual tournaments have become hardcourt. Agassi with the 3rd most career hardcourt titles with a whopping 46. 6 hardcourt slams, 4 of those Australian Opens, where his ball striking abilities were on full display. In fact, Agassi, the 2nd highest all-time Aussie Open win percentage at 91%. That's a 48-5 record. Also the 3rd most hardcourt Masters 1000 titles after Fed and Joker with 14 of those. Agassi elite on hardcourt for 2 whole decades. Next at 4 is someone we don't always associate with hardcourt greatness, Rafael Nadal. So legendary on the clay, but there's really only a few hardcourt resumes better than Rafa's. 4 US Open titles, 2 Australian Opens in 2009 and 2022 with some epic matches along the way. Crazy 5-setters versus Verdasco and Federer, and then the 2 sets from behind final comeback against Medvedev. Several other accolades on hardcourt. Yes, Nadal did prioritize clay at times. He never got over the hump to win the year-end finals, but in an era with Djokovic and Federer, he more than held his own on hard court. Really slim margins for me at number 3, but I went with Pete Sampras. Easily could have flipped Nadal and Sampras. They both have 11 hard court major final appearances, but Sampras with one extra major title at 7, 2 in Australia, tied for the most US Open titles with 5. Sampras, the youngest player to ever win the US Open at age 19, and he also won it in the final tournament of his career, the highest win percentage all time in New York. Sampras was a serve and volley savant, third highest overall win rate at hardcourt slams, and an excellent record against top 10 players on the surface. Number 2 is Switzerland's favorite son, Roger Federer, the original hardcourt GOAT. It's so close between him and Djokovic, but Fed second in most of the relevant categories. 6 Australian Opens and 5 US Open titles. Those 5 trophies in New York won consecutively from 2004 to 08 when Federer rung up his US Open win streak to an astronomical 40 wins in a row before Del Potro slayed Goliath in 09. Roger with the second most hardcourt Masters 1000 titles, the second best win percentage at hardcourt majors, second most ATP Finals titles at 6, a ridiculous 50-1 record on hardcourt in 2005, and my favorite Fed stat here, the only player to ever win a hardcourt major without dropping a single set at the 2007 Australian Open. Just pure dominance. Then at the top spot, the greatest hardcourt resume in the history of the sport, Novak Djokovic. Hard to deny what he's accomplished in his 2 decades with a record 10 Australian Open titles and 4 US Opens. Highest win percentage of all time at the Aussie Open, second highest at the US Open, 6 other times a US Open finalist, so that's 20 hardcourt major finals in all, 29 hardcourt Masters 1000 titles, including at least 3 at each one. He's got a record 7 year-end championships. Djokovic, incredible against the world's best. He's got the highest win percentage against top 10 opponents in all hardcourt events and in Grand Slams. So Fed is definitely close, but I think 2023 really put Djokovic over the top as the best all-around tennis player on the hard court. Thanks a lot for watching my top 10 men's hardcourt players of all time video. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you agree with, what you disagree with about my list, and like and subscribe to the Snowman Sports Media for more tennis content and other sports fun. Cheers!